Welcome to this evening's meeting. Wendy with the meeting announcement.
The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Sparta Board of Education has caused notice of the time and place of this meeting to be published in the New Jersey Herald, the Star Ledger, tapintosparta.net, and the notice of the meeting has been posted on the Sparta Township School District website.
Thank you. Joanne, get a roll call, please.
Ms. Collier?
Here.
Ms. Gagnon?
Present.
Ms. McMichael? Here. Mr. Paleschi? Ms. Sealander?
Here.
Ms. Serafino?
Here.
Dr. Serrano?
Here.
Mr. Wood?
Here.
Mr. Morris?
Here. You can all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we're going to start with this evening with a presentation from Mrs. Rossi. Just want to put it on record. I told her she gets 3 minutes to speak tonight.
Got it.
Timer. She gets long-winded.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So what I'm about to share with you are the results from the New Jersey Graduation Proficiency Assessment, NJGPA, which is something that our students take in the spring. It's administered to all grade 11 students, and it assesses language arts and math standards grounded in the New Jersey Student Learning Standards. It is a measure for graduation readiness. It's one of our 3 pathways, and it's the first pathway to ensure that students have the requirements met through standardized assessments for graduation. There is an ELA and math component. The math component is grounded in Algebra 1 and Geometry standards, and the ELA component is grounded in grade 10 ELA standards. These were some pieces of information that I shared in the past, but just to acknowledge that the first time this was administered, which is, I think, 2022, the cut scores were different. And so last May in 2023, those cut scores were adjusted. And we saw some differences based on that, specifically in our language arts scores. And so those were grounded in the data that we see here tonight, and that they affected our scores in the past in a positive way, the last 2 years as well. And so as I spoke to you again about the graduation pathways, there are 3, and NJGPA is the first graduation pathway. So taking a look at the data, if you look at the chart, you can see that the way the NJGPA assesses students and provides feedback is whether or not they are graduation ready or not yet graduation ready. So in language arts, 94.1%. So if you look at the green, that is this year's data. 94.1% of our 11th graders are graduation ready in English language arts, and 70.5% of our students are graduation ready in math. You can see to the right of that column, students across the state. So while we're 94.1% graduation ready across the state, the norm is 81.6. And in math, while we're graduation ready 70.5% across the state, the norm or the average is 54.7. In the columns next to that, you can see the percentage of students that make up 100% there that are not yet graduation ready. And I'll speak to some of those numbers later. You'll also see, compared to that, students across the state, the average of students across the state who are not yet graduation ready. So this is looking at data across 3 cohorts. So I do want to point out that this does not represent obviously the same class of students and growth or lack thereof. This represents 3 different cohorts of 11th grade students. So you can see in 2022, this again speaks to the change in cut scores, which is why it looks so different. In 2022, in language arts, 51.3% of students were graduation ready. As the cut scores were adjusted, acknowledging across the state that they were set too high and not grounded in recommendations by statisticians and those individuals who create the assessments, they were adjusted. By spring 2023, That cohort of 10th graders were 93.8% of them were graduation ready, and this year 94.1. So that's a lot to celebrate because obviously we know how important these skills and scores are to our students. It's one measure, but it is one measure that shows what students are able to do with the skills that they're internalizing. In math, you can see a similar chart. Again, what's interesting in this chart is the differences in math, even with the adjustment in cut scores, don't look so different. So we're hanging in that 70th percentile. Even looking at last year to this year, while you can see a slight decrease from 77 to 70, those are different cohorts of kids. And so as they're coming through and they're being supported, there are different populations that show different needs. And so when we look at like our tier 1 universal supports, we see consistently kids are performing and able to handle high levels of math instruction. And I'll show you a little bit later where our focus continues to be. So our subgroups are a real area of focus for us, and they've been since COVID. We know that in terms of equity and access, it was some of these subgroups who struggled most or needed greatest levels of support. If you look at the column or the chart to the left for math, you can look at students who are first English language learners, and they are not able to be reported out on because there are under 10 students who took the assessment that are identified as an English language learner, so they would be considered identifiable. So that's something that we don't report on, or that we're not able to report on. When we look at our economically disadvantaged students, we see 50% were graduation ready and 50% were not. And when we look at our students with disabilities, we see that 22.5% were graduation ready and 77.5% were not. So this is an example of where we need to continue to look at individualized data. Obviously, when we look at these numbers for students with disabilities, we know that there are things impacting their learning. And what we're most interested in is looking at adequate growth over time. And so we want to see exactly who the students are and what their growth had looked like prior to the assessment to see if it's just that they're not quite able to meet the grade level standards, but with the supports and modifications, accommodations in place, have they made adequate growth over time, which many of our students do because that is what we monitor consistently, but we are going to dig into that data more closely once everybody is back and after summer. When we look at English language arts, it's the same table. We just see some different numbers. So English language learners, again, were not enough students to be able to report on. For our students who are economically disadvantaged, 70% were graduation ready as compared to 30% who are not. And our students with disabilities, we see much higher rates, 68% are graduation ready and 31% are not. So again, for students who are not, the second pathway would be they can retake this assessment in the fall. There are other assessment measures that they can take to be alternatives to NJGPA, and they're outlined at the state level and in our handbooks. And then for some of our students with more substantive disabilities who can't pass assessments, we have our portfolio assessments, and we continue to use that for a small population of learners as well. So just some reflections overall. Really being able to dive into the data. I think we've done a lot looking at programming at large, and our programming at large is meeting the needs of a large majority of our students. Even when we look at that math population and our math percentiles, while 70% is a strong number, inside of that, some of the numbers that are bringing that data down is in our special populations. So we need to take a closer look at what is happening inside of that. We're also looking at the child as a whole. So while we look at data and we have a new data platform that will make that easier for us to do and more efficient, we're continuing to look at all parts of a student and all areas that impact learning and performance. So we are working with St. Elizabeth across the district to ensure that we have positive behavioral supports and that we really understand what behavior is about and how we respond to it. We have a technology plan that's in development that looks at how we're using technology and the meaningful application behind it. Our cell phone initiative is one thing that is coming out of that will be talked about a little bit later in our policy. We're trying to incentivize extended learning programs. We have things to offer students who need additional support outside the school day, but we don't have as many families wanting to participate and take advantage of that for a large variety of reasons. So if there are other ways, different modes we can present extended learning opportunities, those are things we're looking into as well. We know one size doesn't fit all, and that continues to be accurate. Chronic absenteeism, our students need to be in school for us to be able to support them, and so that's something that's an area of focus for us. Looking at, again, individual students and not like grade 11 language arts. We need to really start to go into more closely each individual student and identify and analyze what their needs are and where those supports come from. We do continue to look at programming. We have professional development in plans in place, and we'll continue to support learning that way. A big initiative for us is consistency and alignment among our schools. We have 5 schools, and that is unique sometimes in a district like ours where you have that many students transitioning so quickly. And finally, we're going to continue to look into things like collaboration and partnerships. So we worked with Mathnasium this year. That was very successful. TutorMe was an online platform. We're looking at another online platform for those that benefit from that. Not all students do. For our younger population, grades 3-5, to continue to supplement. So all of these things are getting positive results, and we want to continue to serve and support as many students as possible to be successful in this first pathway. And that is our presentation. Do you have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion.
Yeah, thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, Dr. Beck?
Yes, a couple of updates tonight. First is regarding the policy revisions. On this evening's agenda, there is a policy revision recommendation as well as a regulation revision recommendation. The policy revision reflects that which was already discussed and presented last month in regard to the use of cell phones in schools. As you can see, the revised language is updated to reflect current devices and allows a little more flexibility at the high school level. As was previously stated, the details will appear in the student handbooks, which will be completed in August. The regulation revision is in regard to student attendance. I will present more information on this topic in August, but the reason for this revision is part of a multifaceted response to the NJDOE's mandate for chronic absenteeism corrective action plans for all schools in the state whose absenteeism rate exceeds 10%. Each of our schools has absenteeism rates greater than 10% and are in the process of creating building-based corrective action plans. The regulation revisions align more closely to state guidelines and remove some of the additional local provisions to those guidelines. In a superintendent report a few months ago, I announced that our district will be moving to a new website provider. That provider is Aptigee, and their website brand is called ThrillShare. If you have visited our website recently, since July 1st, you can see that the new website has launched. Along with the new website, we will now have a new communication notification system that replaces the old Blackboard system. While we still have some optimization to do on the district and school websites, we are excited to partner with ThrillShare for the new school year. Also new for the upcoming school year, we are proud to announce that our district will be utilizing a new online payment service called School Cash Online. School Cash Online has many capabilities that will streamline our student activity transactions and other services while significantly reducing the amount of cash and checks that are processed by our district. All of the aforementioned initiatives are in their final stages, and once they're completed, I will be sending a communication in the coming weeks to the school community, providing more details on these initiatives. That's it.
Thank you. Moving on. Create a motion to move the HIB report.
Motion.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Joanne?
Ms. Collier,
Yes.
Ms. Gagnon,
I'm so sorry, I did not have a chance to review it, so I'm going to abstain.
Ms. McMichael,
Yes.
Ms. Seelander,
Yes.
Ms. Serafino,
Yes.
Dr. Serrano,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Morris.
Yes. Delegate liaison reports.
I just wanted to mention out of communications, just to piggyback on what Dr. Beck said, we're just so excited to see the new website up and running. So the communications committee did meet on Thursday. Minutes will be forthcoming since we're so close to this meeting. But one thing I would just challenge one another as board members is to think about those bragging points that we have for our district, because we really have the opportunity to tell our story in a really sharp way now with this new website. We were just really limited with what we could do before, and I wanted to give a special shout out to Ryan Hardigan and his team just for their hard work on this. They had a very short timeline to get this up and running, and from a financial perspective, from finance and ops, we were very keen to see that transition happen as well, as we were going to save money with this new provider, not be locked into such a long contract. So I definitely like our scores, what we were just seeing from ELA. That's a bragging point of so far ahead of the district, looking at how our high school stands apart. But things across our district at all levels, let's be thinking together how we can highlight that and really tell the Sparta story.
Thank you. Just touch on the shared services. The district's going to be doing some paving, concrete, and curbing work, and we're going to work with the town to do that, and they're going to be doing the majority of the work, obviously to cut costs. So it's good to work with them. They did a few projects with us already, so hopefully that continues to grow and use them in the future. Anyone else? Okay. Public comment number 1. Public comments are invited on all matters pertaining to only action items at this time. Please state the action item number as well as your name, municipality, and group affiliation, if appropriate. For the record, each participant will be received 3 minutes to speak. Once you have had your 3 minutes to speak, you will not be permitted to speak again until public comment number 2. All statements will be directed to me as presiding officer. The board or the administration may or may not respond to any questions or comments after the conclusion of the public participation.
Hi, good evening. My name is Angela DeLucia. I'm the president of the Sparta Education Association. I am speaking to agenda item 15.27. We were just looking for some clarification on policy 5516, the update on, or the first reading update of the device policy. On page 2 of the policy, there's a line that says an ECRD used in violation of this policy will be confiscated by a school staff member or principal or designee. We just wanted some clarification on the confiscation procedure, which is a slippery slope for educators and staff members in the classroom. That's all. Thank you.
Anybody else? Motion to close, public comment number 1.
Motion.
Thank you. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Very well.
Yes, I can respond to that. It was actually brought up by one of our committee members as well, the same thing. So, yeah, right now it says will, and we're going to discuss next month just revising that to can, a little more looser language.
Okay. Moving on to personnel and policy. Can I get a motion to move 15.1 to 15.34?
Motion.
Thank you. Second. Thank you.
It was I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add that 15.6, minor revision on 15.6. It should read 1 hour per day, not 1 hour per week. 15.6.
All right, staying with the second discussion. Okay. Joanne?
Yeah, I think we did want to discuss. Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah. As far as the cell phone policy, I just wanted to speak to the fact that I do support it, and obviously the great changes that we hope to see benefit our students and staff as they can do their jobs more efficiently and the kids can have enhanced learning. Some of the reservations that I expressed during committee and I expressed again tonight is, I guess there's no regulation to go along with it, which I understand is okay, but we don't have a look to see what the handbooks look like yet. So my reservation is just making sure that we do this correctly and that it's done efficiently and effectively, because it is such an important policy, and I do want to make sure that as one of the first districts inside of Sussex County that we do it perfectly the first time, because I would hate to see it fail because it wasn't done perfectly. So I guess the concern that I have is that we won't have eyes on the handbook until we're already up for second read on the policy. So if there are pieces of the handbook that maybe don't, I know they are going to go to board approval, because Dr. Beck, I appreciated you saying that we could approve the handbooks. They're not?
No, the handbooks don't get approved by the board.
I've learned that this afternoon.
You learned that this afternoon.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Then I guess
Yeah,
that was
it's
what
not
was-
common for the boards to approve handbooks.
Correct, okay.
Regulations that go along with the policy, some board regulations are approved, some regulations are administrative and the board doesn't approve them.
Right.
But no generally to handbooks.
Okay, so therein lies my concern. Not that I'm looking to administer the schools in any way, shape, or form. I just want to make sure that I'm submitting my vote to approve a policy that I can really understand the ins and the outs of how it will be implemented. I want to make sure that I can support it fully in that sense. So maybe we can explore adding basic regulation down the line after we approve the policy so as not to hold it up. I would hate to see us move into September without these things in place, because I think it's obviously important to start the school year for the teachers as well, to establish the rules and the ground rules for their schools and their buildings. So that's my concern. I was looking to see if we could discuss it as a board as well.
Is there a way to see the changes to the handbook that are going to directly affect us before we do vote on the second reading, just to make sure that we are all in alignment and we do think it's going to be supported successfully and there's not going to be any gray area or confusion or anything like that?
Perhaps the board could preview it. I guess what I'm thinking is that the policy is general enough, general for a reason, which we discussed, why the policy is what it is. And I understand why you would want to see some specifics. So I'm wondering how we can do that specifically. Maybe we can discuss exactly what you wish to see as far as protocols go, give some input on what you feel the protocols could be, which I would discuss with the admin team. Obviously, the handbooks would have to align to policy and regulation. They do in every other aspect of the handbook, attendance, you name it. So it would have to align. So I'm not sure exactly how we could go about, but making sure that you have input on what you feel that what the protocol should look like. I'm assuming you're talking about the high school level because the other is pretty clear.
If I may chime in as well. So I share the same sentiments, and I know we did discuss this in committee, but I think that there's a few things that I'd like to address. So number one for me, a huge portion of why the Roundtable or now Ideas Committee was formulated, or one of the main incentives, was to really address this, in addition to other ongoing issues or proactive measures we can take in a collaborative way with administration, teachers, educators, staff, and the board. So I guess for me, I have some concerns and reservations. It was presented, and Lee, I know you're not on the Ideas Committee, but because I am, it was presented in a way that because of there being such differential between the enforcement at different buildings, putting it in student handbooks gives the opportunity for us to really cater and make sure that our approach is nuanced enough by what each building's needs require. I think that, to Dr. Beck's point, the policy is somewhat vague, but deliberately so. This is a new, innovative initiative. It is not necessarily, how do I say this gently? It is new and it is innovative, and the odds of it rolling out perfectly in September are not necessarily guaranteed because of the nature of this. So we have partnered quite a bit, and I'm sure Ms. Rossi can speak to this more, but we've partnered with other districts who have had more experience in rolling out these initiatives than we have yet. These were recommendations based on those experiences and the data to support that. And just in committee, I would say that, some areas that I find are still gray for me. When it was asked, what would you like to see in regulation specifically that isn't covered here? And it was kind of an I'm not sure. So I guess I would like to hear what specifically we're trying to cover in regulation that wouldn't be covered in the handbooks, and maybe you can speak to that so I can understand where you're coming from.
You bring up a really good point. I don't think it's necessarily what I would like to see. I just think that whatever I would be voting on and supporting, I would like to understand what that is. So with what I'm learning about the handbooks now is that it really is out of the board's hands to have that piece. And so for me, it feels like maybe if we could revisit in the future, like passing this policy, getting it underway, and maybe in the future we do add regulation to kind of dictate what might be in the handbooks or not. And like you said, it is kind of unfolding. We don't really know. I spoke to the NJSBA rep who kindly took my call at the 11th hour today because I had some reservations, and I know I'm attending the workshop down in October in Atlantic City, and they're going to be planning on having a huge portion of their training dedicated to this topic. So we're moving at the speed that we're given information in our district as well. So I guess those are just my reservations. I wanted to just talk about it with my fellow board members because, like Caitlin said, not all of us are on the ideas committee, so I think some of the information that maybe some board members had funneled to them didn't necessarily make it to all of us. And I want to make sure that we're all just aware of what we're doing here.
Maybe if I could explain a broad vision of what we feel this will look at based on our conversations with teachers and our conversations amongst ourselves as administrators and conversations with the board. Because what the handbook would do, the handbook is just going to align to the policy and make sure that we adhere to the policy and outline consequences for violating the policy, right? But what we envision happening is at the high school level, because K-8 we see not really a space for cell phones. But on the high school level, what we envision happening on a broad scale is that generally, students will not be allowed to use their cell phones in class or possess even their cell phones in class, where they would come into the classroom and check up their cell phones and maybe like one of those calculator holder type things. You check it on your way in, leave it there, let's focus on class. And if and when the individual instructor feels it appropriate, that there's a time and a place that they need to use their cell phones for something instructionally, at that time, they would go get their cell phones. So the cell phone use in class outside of that, again, this is broadly speaking, cell phone use or even possession or scrolling and things like that, not welcome in the classroom outside of that, outside of what the teacher specifically states, which would be on occasion. And then in between, then the students get their cell phones as they leave the classroom, and maybe they can check it between classes, that type of thing, but it's not going to have a place in the classroom unless specified by the teacher.
Thank you, Dr. Beck. And then just to echo off of that, I know we had discussed a little bit in committee, like what are those circumstances where a cell phone will be necessary during instructional time? It also becomes an equity level issue, in my mind. Are all students having access to the same cell phones? Do some students have no cell phones? Are we using them in place of Chromebooks? If so, why? So those were some of the questions that I had as far as the policy, because it was vague enough to say that coaches and staff could kind of designate when would be appropriate to use it. And I wanted to just make sure that it's not going to be used as a primary resource for the reasons I just mentioned. So that was a concern I had as well, just because it is policy and it is vague, and I guess the exacts were where my mind kind of went and wondered. I think now that we do see the data that supports the fact that we know these devices are not the healthiest for students, obviously they're not going away, and we can utilize them and teach the kids to utilize them correctly. But I think we should make sure that we're not making it so that the parents who are more and more aware of these issues, and as their students come up and graduate and kind of phase out, so now we have our next sub-generation of little kids coming into middle school and high school, and I predict we'll see a lot more parents saying, no, you're not going to be having this device. So is that going to be an ever-changing topic in the handbook? Would that be something that's delineated in some kind of regulation somewhere? So I guess my mind just went a million places, but I do support the policy and all the changes that it promises to bring. So I want to see it succeed.
Oh, sorry. Were you talking? I think you bring up a really good point, Lee. I think this policy is not going to be finished when it passes. You know what I mean? I think this is something we're going to have to observe through the year, bring it up, change, see if we have to add more. You know, I think it's just so broad right now, so buildings can test what's really working. And I have a lot of the same concerns as you. Like, have we outlined, like, are we supporting teachers with kind of like outlining what to do and what not to do and how to handle these situations? But it's a lot of like untested water. So I can understand, like, I totally get how you feel, but I think the policy right now supports a lot of freedom for educators to kind of take ownership of their classroom, and then observing that and seeing what Dr. Beck recommends going forward is something I think we absolutely will end up like addressing this again. You know what I mean?
I was just going to add that I think that something that you were saying is that the research is evolving. And so we're fortunate that we now have access to like this vast amount of knowledge that is showing us some different things. I mean, like pre-pandemic, it was like, one-to-one learning, personalized pathways. Everybody can learn on a digital, platform and be successful that way, whether it's a cell phone or a Chromebook and there's new information out and it continues to build. So I do think we need something that allows for some of that flexibility. And I also think that one thing that's so important to note is that there are spaces right now that are utilizing some of the methods that Dr. Beck talked about in our high school that are very successful. So we also leaned into where it's going well, where these things are working. So in some ways, it's not this brand new, what's special about this initiative is not that it's a brand new practice, it's that we're really committing to consistency. So we're really taking a stand to say where it's working really well, which also happens to align to the updated research. We need to be consistent across classrooms, across content areas, so that kids aren't confused about where they can use something, where they can't. They give a teacher a hard time in one room because they let them do things, and in the next room they don't. And so it's really, I think, most about consistency, leaning on the spaces that it's working already inside of, and making sure that as much of that is articulated in the handbook, while still giving us a chance to be responsive as new things unfold. But I just wanted to mention that because we are talking about the newness of it, and the newness of it is really the commitment that we all need to take a stand and be consistent together in how we're supporting students. And that was hard, I think, for teachers to do on their own. And so we need each other to be supportive in this way. And I think we've had a lot of great conversations about that. So I also hear all the commentary, but I just thought it was important to add, that some of the practices are already happening and are already really working well. And so that is the foundation.
Can you explain what practices those would be? Because I'm interested to hear.
Yeah, so just what we talked about before, like there's a teacher who has like a cell phone box, so different than the holder. And so at the beginning of class, kids know it's a practice, it's a routine and procedure, and they come in, they put their phones in the box, so the phones are in the classroom if there was an emergency, if there was a need, but they're not on them, so they're not getting notifications or buzzing. It's a cell phone-free environment, so they can really focus on learning. So whether or not it's a box in every classroom, but that teacher really spoke to us about how she kind of instilled those routines and procedures and is really meeting with a lot of success, which is what we're seeing when we look at other districts as well. So again, it's the idea that when you come in, this device comes off of you, and then when it's appropriate and if there's a need for it. And that is really, there's a varied, you think about like photography class where you have photos on your phone, or a statistics class where it's easier to run data on an app as opposed to maybe your Chromebook that runs at a certain speed and whatnot. So to identify all of those might be challenging or might over time be productive. But that's an example of one space where that already exists.
Thank you. I did hear about the photography, and that did bring up an equity issue for me in my mind. Students who maybe just have a flip phone, or, maybe they don't have access to a phone that has a great camera. Just my eyes, just thinking ahead. But thank you, Tara. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So there were times, I do have a high schooler, and she was in photography, and I used the phone as punishment. And there were times where she did go to school without it, and I don't remember the exact specifics of the situation, but there were times where I do think there was something available for her to use in that class, and they don't use it all of the time. So my daughter has gone to school without a cell phone, and for the most part, it hasn't been an issue. And some teachers, like Tara said, at back to school night, they have, it almost looks like a calendar. Each pocket is numbered. They put their phone in. It stays there, and it comes back out. I think the biggest thing from this dialogue, it sounds like a lot of us, or almost all of us, have the same goal in mind, which I think is really important. I think it's huge for a lot of different opinions to be sitting at this table and in the audience and in the schools to all have a common goal. I think as long as we keep that in the forefront, I think this will be successful. Like I said, it may have to be revised, but I do think it's a step in the right direction. We just need to keep, our eye on the goal here at the end.
I mean, this policy, when was the last, revised,
A while ago.
A long time ago. So obviously changes had to be made. As vague as the policy may be at this time, there's going to be a lot of work in progress, especially through this year. And just like Emily said, I can almost guarantee we'll be sitting here next year talking about the same policy, adding stuff, taking stuff away that didn't work with the administration. I think what it comes down to, and during the roundtable, I made it very clear to the administration that were present that day, it comes down to them enforcing the rules to the policy. Because if they're not going to enforce it, nothing's going to happen. So they have to be stern. First warnings, first day of school, and so on and so forth. So with regards to the regulation, I mean, the regulation would go district-wide, so it would kind of, trump having the handbooks, because then one says the other, so we'd have to make sure they coincide and go together.
I mean, if the handbooks are sufficient, then a regulation probably wouldn't be necessary. We just need to make sure that there's something sufficient. No,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, if the handbooks are sufficient, then I don't see a need for a regulation. We just need to make sure that there's something that's sufficient that gives clear guidelines.
But they're out of our purview as the board, so we won't be able to make sure they're sufficient. That's my thought. They will be sufficient because the admin that we have here will do a great job.
I was just
Well,
going to
don't
say,
think
I'll
it would
make
be-
sure that they align with the
Yeah,
policy, and I'll make sure that the
absolutely.
administrators enforce it.
Absolutely.
With anything in the handbook, really.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think as the months go on, a regulation can be brought up at a later date and revised and made, so it can
Yeah. See
attach
what the
to the
need is.
policy. See it, exactly.
I mean, I don't think it hurts to look at the equity issue. Obviously, people in the high school, teachers and staff there would have a better grasp on that. It doesn't hurt to look into that and see what type of issue that is. But I do think the biggest thing that Tara said about consistency, I think that's huge. Like, it needs to be consistent.
Right, and I think that's where I keep going back to, like, all of our practices and our data go back to consistency and alignment. We have the 5 buildings, and that is the part where, bringing up your point about statistics gets me thinking about it differently. I think in the spirit of the data that was presented by Dr. Esposito and you as well at the last meeting, along with, reading like the anxious generation, looking at other data, was that I guess what I felt come across, what really I think the spirit of this policy is to help create cell phone-free havens to support the mental health and achievement of our students. What I'm concerned about, when I'm hearing about, like, well, there are some places where we are going to have it, where there are some places where we're not. Maybe they could check it during, like, between classes. I know it would be met with opposition, I'm sure, within the student body, but I've also seen schools that have done it, and by the 2 weeks in, I've read how it's changed the whole dynamic of communication, friendships, relationships, getting them ready for that independence where they're not just going straight to their cell phone. And I think that's where, I do support the policy, but I would like to see a little more to make sure that it's going into the nuance of the spirit of this, and also making sure that we are truly setting up our students for success, not just with good intention. Because I think if they can just be back on in between, I'm wondering if we're really giving them that break from the devices. Are we really keeping them in a great space to learn? So I do support going through a first read, but I do share the concerns with maybe needing a regulation down the line. And I think I would support that as well.
I just want to say a few things too. I agree with Kurt, and I shared those concerns in committee or I shouldn't say that, in the roundtable discussion ideas committee, because I do think enforcement is a huge portion of this, and I think that's something that we all share as a concern. Making sure, for me, even the I hate to say it this way, but the equity in enforcement, making sure that it is being enforced and that it's done in a way that it doesn't confuse our student body as to, well, why in this class can I do this versus this in another? So I understand some of the concerns for sure, but I do want to make sure that we are not subverting the process, because it does feel like a slippery slope between this and administering the district. I think, for example, when we're in committee and there's discussion of, board approving the handbooks in full, I can't get on board with that, because I don't feel that actually supports what we're trying to achieve, to Wendy's point, that it seems like a collective that we're all actually on the same page about. So I do understand, and I'm not saying I won't ever support regulation. I think it's something that we need to practice. We need to let the boots on the ground give this good run through, see how this year pans out. If it comes up in 3 months, hey, at this school we're having this huge issue and we need to make it right, that's why we're here. But I think to assume proactively that there are going to be issues without laying out what those are and clearly laying out solutions, in my mind, again, I think too, another thing, it seems like the majority of the enforcement we're talking about through regulation would be punishment. I don't know beyond punishment what we're really talking about. So that's another area of concern for me. I would rather see this be something that's super collaborative, that surprisingly most parents, administrators, educators, even students, I hope eventually, and maybe Chad could speak to this more than anyone, will grow to appreciate, and it will become a collaborative effort rather than something that's so strict that it becomes rebellious, or there's more of an opportunity for it to become a contentious issue rather than it being a collaborative initiative. And I think to what we were discussing in that committee, the data shows that when it's done in a collaborative way, it actually is more successful than when students feel as though, or parents even, because there are plenty of parents that want their kids to have phones, surprisingly, which is totally within their right. We find that it is actually better when it is collaborative and positive rather than when it's mandated. So for me, I say let's not stall the process, because if we, I know there was discussion of motioning to table this policy. I don't support that. I say let's roll this out. This was asked of us. Let's support it. Let's roll this out in September. And down the road, if it comes to be that we need to revisit this, which I'm sure we will, to Kurt's point, whether that's through regulation or anything else, we do it then. But I say let's give it a fair shot, and let's work collaboratively with our educators and our administration to make it happen.
I don't think anyone's saying not to work collaboratively. I think this discussion was important, and I think that questions were important, because if people are having them at this table, then I can guarantee you that people in the public are having the same questions, and I actually think it's very beneficial for us to be having this conversation here and getting this out in the air and getting things answered and questions asked. I don't think anyone was sitting here saying that they're not in support of this policy. Changes, yes. Questions, yes. But I do think it was important to ask these questions at the table tonight.
Thank you, Wendy. Tara, I had one last question, and I won't belabor it any further. You did mention the one-to-one initiative and the pandemic stuff, and I know Chromebooks are a thing. Are Chromebooks a piece of the learning experience that would one day be addressed under a policy like this one? I know I've heard that they're highly relied upon in certain certain schools within the district, and as we're looking at cell phones and screen time and mental health, I'm wondering how much that might play into things as far as the mental health as well.
Yeah, sure. I did want to say two things, so I'll answer that first, and then I'll just go back to one last component, because I think these are all really important discussions that are also helpful for the public to hear and understand the deeper roots of our decision making. But when it comes to the Chromebooks, in our tech plan, one of the areas that we're really looking at is the balance of technology and engaging instruction. Not to say that technology can't be and isn't engaging instruction in some ways. The problems, screen time in general, is something that we have to be cognizant of. Cell phones take that to another level because of the accessibility of so many other things that you don't have that same level of accessibility on a Chromebook or like an iWatch, even though those are still screens and they still have some mode of accessibility. But I don't know that we've discussed it in terms of a policy at this point, because there are really meaningful tools. And I think that's where I was going with the cell phones, is that we do have to remember that these are all tools, tech tools, that really are here to stay. And they're not bad or good. They just are tools. And so, when we think about what I wanted to say a little bit earlier was the body of research that we look at and the overwhelming information that suggests, you hear things like wait till 8, because the tool of a cell phone and what you can access without, on our Chromebooks, we have things like GoGuardian, for example. So you have the ability to support and protect what kids are accessing on their cell phones. We don't, as a district, of course. Parents can. And so the idea of wait till 8 is that really before 8th grade, it doesn't serve, the research shows it doesn't serve really any productive tool for students to use in a learning capacity. That doesn't mean it can't connect them to a grandparent in Virginia or allow them to do other things that have merit, but it's not a productive learning tool. By high school, there are places, now that they're developmentally in a different phase of learning, that there can be benefits to the tool. Showing them and teaching them the balance and showing them the benefits of the tool is what's really important to identify. So I guess I'll tie it back to your question, just really understanding that the research isn't comprehensive like K-12. K-8, it says something very specific, and 9-12, it changes a bit because kids are becoming young adults, and these tools are really helpful in the adult world in the right ways. And so going back to the Chromebook, that falls in the category, and it is something that we're navigating, and it is something that we all believe in. Again, the collaboration around this work with teachers, administrators, support staff, students has been really impressive and helpful and inspiring, actually. So I do think we'll be able to find that balance, and I think that we are all feeling that we were led sort of in one direction, and we disagree that that direction exclusively is what's going to support our kids as learners.
I appreciate that, Tara. Thank you. And just to reiterate, I was just happy to hear the discussion, the robust discussion that we could have as a board, because so infrequently are all 9 of us able to sit and speak because we are segmented into little tiny committees. So it is nice when we have these big changes coming along that we can sit and speak and hear each other out. So I appreciate everyone's collaboration with this.
And if I could just wrap up that conversation, just to kind of reiterate what Tara said, what Ms. Rossi said about the collaboration that's taken place. I would like to applaud the board, the teachers that have worked with us throughout this process, the admin team. We're really, Lee made the point before, we're really on the cutting edge of this as districts in the state, but definitely districts in the county, of getting out ahead of this and addressing this. And I applaud the board for moving forward with it, because if you keep waiting to make sure that, well, let's wait for more research, let's wait to see what other districts are doing, then it's, then you're going to start falling behind the curve. So the fact that we're getting out ahead of this, the fact that, to everybody's point, it will be a living document. We will revisit this multiple times. We'll revisit it on a regular basis, on a weekly basis probably, in our admin meetings. And, I'll bring it back to the board and update the board and let the board know what we need. But to be out in front of this in the best interest of our students, I already have other districts reaching out to me, asking me, Matt, how did that process go? How did you work with the board? How did you work with the teachers? How did you work with the admin team? What does your policy look like? It's just really nice to see, and everybody should be applauded for that.
Okay, Joanne, can we get a roll call on 15-1 to 15-3-4?
Ms. Collier?
Yes.
Ms. Gagnon?
Yes.
Ms. McMichael?
Yes.
Ms. Sealander?
Yes.
Ms. Serafino?
Yes.
Dr. Serrano?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
Yes. All right, a motion for finance 17-1.
16.
Oh, I skipped 16-1 to 16-1-3.
Motion.
Thank you, Emily.
Second.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to make a motion to table 16.2, the staff expenses for overnight trips. We're going to wait on that one. We have plenty of time to work on that one. We're just going to wait till the teachers come back to get some more details to make sure we have that all correct.
It's really just administratively withdrawn. Yeah.
Administratively withdrawn, 16.2.
Okay, so we'll be voting 16-1, then 16-3 to 16-3-1-3. Roll call, Joanne?
Ms. Collier?
Yes.
Ms. Gagnon?
Yes, as amended, Mark? Is it including his automatically, or do I have to?
Yeah, it's automatic.
Okay.
He just administratively withdrew it rather than making him, he doesn't make motions.
Right,
So
just
it
making
was
sure
just
that I don't have to
withdrawn.
clarify.
Yep.
Thank you, yes.
Ms. McMichael?
Yes.
Ms. Sealander?
Yes.
Ms. Serafino?
Yes.
Dr. Serrano?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
Yes. A motion for finance 17-1 to 17-2-3.
Motion.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Emily. Discussion? Joanne?
Ms. Collier?
Yes.
Ms. Gagnon?
Yes.
Ms. McMichael?
Yes.
Ms. Sealander?
Yes.
Ms. Serafino?
Yes.
Dr. Serrano?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Morris.
Yes. Okay, we have nothing for 18 operations. Anybody have anything for old business? New business. Okay, we now move on to public comment number 2. The board uses, excuse me, the board uses the second public comment period to invite comments on all matters pertaining to the school district. Please state your name, municipality, and group affiliation if appropriate. For the record, each participant will be given 3 minutes to speak. Once you've had your allotted 3 minutes to speak, you will not be permitted to speak again. All statements should be directed to me as presiding officer. The board or the administration may or may not respond to any questions or comments after the conclusion of public comment. Calling all public speakers.
Hi, my name is Maya Weidenbach from Sparta. I'm here tonight to address an issue with how I see middle school math placement. There are 3 math classes available to incoming 7th grade students: Math 7, Pre-Algebra, and Algebra. My daughter, although a constant honor roll student, was placed in the lowest level math class for this upcoming year. My daughter also had an overall math GPA this year of 91%, and she is in the gifted and talented program. When I tried to appeal this decision, I was categorically denied the right to even appeal because I was told she did not fall within a certain amount of points on the rubric to even be considered for said appeal. When I looked at the rubric that was posted to our district's website when this happened, I was baffled because it showed Ella did qualify for pre-algebra based on that rubric. Apparently, the rubric that has changed drastically in the past few years, and nobody bothered to email parents or update the district website. Ella specifically received 0 out of 8 points on the current rubric in the STAR standardized testing category, but 3 years ago would have received 7 out of 8 points and been placed into pre-algebra. That is a huge difference and makes me question how and why these rubrics are reevaluated. Is it because of class size and needing to put a certain amount of kids into each level math class regardless of ability? If so, that is not the child's problem, that is the district's. Second, I know of 2 families who are also categorically denied the right to even appeal with almost the same email rhetoric verbatim. Yet after my husband spoke at the last board meeting, 2 of these families were magically allowed to move their daughters up a level. This creates a lack of trust in the appeal process given to all of us and the rubric in general. Finally, going back a year, in 6th grade you have 2 options, Math 6 and Math 6 Accelerated. Kids who completed Math 6 Accelerated this year only needed 8 to 19 points on the rubric to get into pre-algebra in 7th, while kids in Math 6 needed 19 to 21 points. Does that sound fair to you at all? What is so drastically different that kids in Math 6 need 11 more points on the rubric than kids in Math 6 Accelerated to go into pre-algebra? We have had several meetings, hired an education advocate, and overall feel we are being stonewalled unnecessarily in this process. We have addressed other points in previous communications that should be addressed as well, but again, our main points are: 1, why were other families told they did not even qualify for an appeal based on their child's rubric points, but were ultimately pushed into the next level math class after being denied almost verbatim to how we were initially? 2, why do kids in accelerated math only need 8 to 19 points on the rubric to get into pre-algebra, but kids in Math 6 need 19 points? It kind of feels like kids in Math 6 need to do literal backflips to get into pre-algebra, while it is made extremely easy for kids taking Math 6 Accelerated. I'm imploring people on the board to take a look at this. I don't think this is the last time you'll be hearing a complaint on this nature by a parent.
Thank you.
Good evening again. My name is Angela DeLucia, and I am the very proud president of the Sparta Education Association. While I know the wheel of progress never stops turning, it is my sincere hope that everyone has had at least a little time to enjoy their summer so far. Just a few short weeks ago, we celebrated the promotion of our 8th graders and the graduation of our seniors, and both ceremonies, while extremely warm, were extremely successful. We are grateful that the administration was amenable to the accommodations that the staff needed due to the extreme temperatures. We always appreciate the opportunity to have open and honest conversations. For the SEA and the Sparta School District as a whole, we know that summertime is no time for slacking. Our IT department has been busy preparing the buildings and equipment to ensure that our students and staff have the most up-to-date technology and access. Our 12-month secretaries have been hard at work laying the foundation for an organized opening to the 24-25 school year. Many educators are contributing to supplementary student learning through meaningful lessons and work in our ESY programs. And almost 80 Sparta School community members have come together to form a very friendly pickleball league. The SEI is very glad to see policy revisions listed in tonight's agenda. An attendance policy that helps to ensure, an attendance regulation that helps to ensure students are in school more often is essential, an essential first step to a more effective and efficient classroom experience and outcome. When students are present, they are more successful, and the revised definition of excused absences will certainly help. And when they are present, limited access to cell phones for high school students and no cell phones in the earlier grades has myriad benefits. If we can eliminate one major distraction, this allows our educators to focus on the priorities, the lessons, the learning, and the relationships. Our students are a cell phone generation. Most of them are used to having that device with them at all times. We understand that this may be a learning curve for them and us, but with a decrease in cell phone access and use in school, we can increase our face-to-face relationship building skills, foster community, and make positive improvements to mental health. This is all in addition to reinforcing the teaching and learning priorities in the classrooms. Many SEA members are engaged in professional development this summer. The books that we are reading are reader-friendly and contain easy-to-digest data that helps solidify the rationale behind the change in policy and future changes in student behavior expectations. The Anxious Generation, Stolen Focus, and Parenting in the Screen Age are outstanding resources for the entire school community. I highly recommend, if you have not done so already, that you pick one or all of them up. Soon enough, we'll be welcoming everyone back, but until then, let's continue to work, communicate, and enjoy the summer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jenny Derricks, Tap into Sparta. Some of the things I'm going to ask you, you may have already covered. I'm sorry I was late. I had to teach my class this evening. It sounds like you may have already discussed, this is regarding the cell phone policy. The handbook, the student handbook is referenced in the policy, though the current handbook doesn't have any discussion of cell phone use. Question I've asked prior to the meeting is, how can you change a mandatory policy when it seems like you're drawing back on the requirements for the high school, where it prohibits use on campus during curricular or even co-curricular? There is now the opportunity for students to use the cell phones. To Lauren's point, and a number of you talked about consistency, but to Lauren's point, if we're offering the opportunity to have a screen-free or a cell phone-free zone, creating a safe area where students can be free from the mental issues the mental health issues that we're talking about, and so on, the inconsistency of you can check your phone while you're in the hallway or during study hall or something seems inconsistent, and maybe something you can consider. Also, have you considered wearables? I look around, a lot of you are wearing Apple Watches. Is there any indication that that's going to be covered in the policy and whatever comes in the future? I understand you felt the need to remove some of the things that seem antiquated, like pagers and PDAs, but they may have a resurgence once the cell phone use gets curtailed. So I know you keep saying that it's going to be something that's evolving, but that can also lead to confusion, as some of you have spoken about. The student survey for College of St. Elizabeth, which was 16.6 on the agenda. The College of St. Elizabeth was the topic on the agenda. A couple of parents talked to me about this disappointment they had that even though their students knew they weren't supposed to take the survey, the survey itself is not on the agenda, but College of St. Elizabeth is. Even though their students knew that they weren't supposed to take the survey, they were basically bribed with food, and an 8th grade student is unlikely to turn down breakfast or a free bagel or whatever the bribe was, and they were unhappy with that. And I don't know if that's been related to you, but I told them I would relate it. The transfers and finance documents weren't linked, or that are usually linked. Is there a way to get those?
They should have been attached.
I couldn't see them there, but
I would have
thank
to
you.
check into that. Yeah, no, they should have been uploaded.
I
And
see
then-
them now, but maybe it wasn't earlier.
Okay, because I looked yesterday. I just have one other question.
Thank you, Jenny.
I know, but I got some of my time taken. The Atlantic
That's 3, it's not Jen.
football has $400 for health, medical on sidelines. Does that an NJSAA requirement?
Thank you.
Thank you.
The transfers are attached now. I see it right here. Anybody else? Motion to close. Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, anyone for good of the order?
I would actually like to touch on some of what Jenny said about the inconsistencies of our cell phone policy. I don't think this is necessarily going to be true. We still have a lot of work to be done. And when I initially read the policy, at first I was a little fearful because I kind of thought, oh, they're fully banning phones in all schools, but then it's going to go down to the handbook. And I don't think that there's anything of the sort of where we're not going to be setting up cell phone use zones. And I can see how you could say that there might be some inconsistency when you go into a classroom and you check it into a box and then you leave and you have your phone. But you also got to keep in mind that you're dealing with students and high school students, and there is physically no possible way that you're going to create a cell phone free school. It's not going to happen. You might see a very large spike in bathroom usage to use your phone. So I don't really see the inconsistencies happening. I could see how students might try to do what they can to avoid it, but that's students. And I think as long as you're consistent in the classroom, that's what's important.
Thanks, Chad. I'll just comment too on the details of the policy and how it will be implemented. We've been discussing this topic for over a year now, and really got serious about this topic over the past 6 months, and really started to work on the policy. In those 6 months where we really started to get serious about it, we've had input from teachers and administrators, from board members, from all kinds of stakeholders, and these are the policies and protocols that the experts have come up with. And of course, they're going to be, again, it's going to be a living document. There's going to be a need for revision at times, but this is what we came up with from our experiences and from our expertise. And then just to comment on how do you revise a mandatory policy, the fact that it's a mandatory policy means that you have to have the policy, and that the policy must follow statute. And it does that.
I have a few things as well. So just to that point, I don't know if it helps, but if we have a parent reaching out with information like that about the survey, I don't know, that's the first I've heard of that. So maybe you can defer that parent to Dr. Beck, and maybe there's something he can do to address that. Yeah, that's, oh, okay. Well, usually for
Before you get
types
off that topic, could I jump in real fast right
Yes,
there?
please, go
I just
ahead.
wanted you to know that that's just approving the 3rd year of our 3-year partnership, and the most recent survey was the parent survey. So kids took the survey like the first year, which was last year was 23-24, so they took a survey in 22-23. So I don't know what they're referring to, but that's not what we're approving, and the most recent was the parent. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I just
found
wanted to jump in real fast.
I
with
appreciate that
topic.
because I also found that problematic in different ways. A few things I wanted to say. Number one, on the cell phone use policy, I also want to commend everyone, especially our administration, because I think a lot of us were very excited to be on board with this, but also relieved. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it rolls out. And I just want to absolutely strongly encourage parents and students, but especially parents, to really help our district when it comes to tackling these new issues that we will inevitably have. But we are doing everything we can to address our chronic absenteeism, which is an unfortunate element of this of our district at this time. So between that, and the cell phone use, everything that you can do as parents to help us in that cause, I would say we're relying on you in many ways, and we will hope that that collaboration certainly extends to parents and students as we continue to roll those out. But a few things on the agenda that I just want to highlight. I want to thank, and I might forget a few, but I want to thank the United Methodist Church, their generous donation to tackle some of the lunch balances that we have, the Helen Morgan PTO for student handbooks, and especially the Sparta Education Foundation for flexible seating for K through 2 classrooms. Seeing those items, I just appreciate it so much, and we are very, very lucky to have the support that we do. So I think that it deserved a little shout out. So thank you to those entities for helping us accommodate our students.
I wanted to piggyback on that too, is that the SEF is preparing a new initiative, and more information will be out on that, but to start the school year off with a readathon that has been very successful in other places, and it's an opportunity where you don't actually have to physically participate and show up somewhere on a given day, which is what's very difficult for people to be able to do, but it's almost like a virtual participation, and they really have done amazing things to allow for our staff to have some innovative opportunities that you just spoke to. So look forward to that, and more information will be sent home soon.
Okay, since we went backwards a little bit there on public comment, I don't know who you received those complaints from, Jenny, in the future. I don't know if they did complain to the building administration, but those type of complaints don't come to us, or they don't even go to Dr. Beck. They don't go to him ever. They go to the building administration. Okay, but I'm saying, you said we did nothing about it. You said that under your breath. You did too. I heard you. So these people who complain nonstop, it becomes annoying. They come to us. We don't do anything. It's not our job. It's the building administration. Tell them to go to the building. If they can't handle it, then it comes to him. So. Okay. All right, back to good of the order. I have nothing. Summer camps have started. Everything's going well. Been to a couple of them. It's going good. No one else? Very well. We are now going to close and go into closed session where we were going to talk personnel and legal matters. No action will be taken, and we'll be adjourning right from there, immediately after. Motion to go into closed session.
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.